everyone. Welcome to our second ABA webinar. We plan on providing free webinars to our students, to the community, both local, international, and domestic communities, just for anyone. We really want to help spread the awareness of applied behavior analysis and how we can really transform people's lives. So today, the topic is supporting students with challenging behaviors. Specifically, I'm going to talk about proactive to reactive solutions, and I have quite a bit to cover today. So I am very excited to share with you the knowledge and the research that I have been involved with over the last several years. So going back to Erich Bronfenbrenner's ecocultural theory, he suggested that a child's development is very complex. A child's development is complex in the sense that there are 5 systems that encompasses how a child is going to develop. So according to Bronfenbrenner's first, kind of system is the student, is the individual person, right? So I start as my own system. And that microsystem is that immediate system, and individuals in the microsystem could be teachers, parents, peers, educators, therapists. So any individual who has an important role or who helps shape and watch the student or a child is going to fall within that microsystem. So as you are here listening to this webinar today, think of how you have a direct impact on the student you support. And if you're like, oh yeah, I'd have a direct impact, then you fall within that student's microsystem. Whether you like it or not, if you have a direct impact on that student, you are going to be in that student's microsystem. The mesosystem, this doesn't have this system is kind of like that transitional system, I want to say, but the mesosystem is all about relationships. So the mesosystem, while it doesn't have a direct impact on the students' development, the individuals within the microsystem and the relationships that those individuals have with each other falls within that mesosystem. So the mesosystem is really looking at the relationship between key stakeholders for that student. So a perfect example is if you are a teacher, if you are a therapist, or let's say you're just a professional, how you communicate with the parents, caretakers, nannies, babysitters, the mom, the dad, the grandma, grandpa, how you communicate and have a relationship with these other people within that microsystem, that's going to impact the student's mesosystem. And vice versa. If you are a parent, how you communicate with other individuals that impact your child's life, that's going to impact the child's mesosystem. We then have a slightly bigger system, which is called the exosystem. And this is looking at more of the immediate environment that the student is in. And when I say immediate, think of it both on the web as well as the actual environment. So these could be the neighborhoods, social media, that's a big one. And, this is kind of big when it falls under social media, because nowadays, what I'm seeing is younger and younger grade levels are getting access to all these inappropriate content because of social media. Now, there are some very amazing things about social media, but on the flip side, I'm seeing younger and younger students being exposed to things that I probably wasn't exposed to until I was, an adolescent or young adult. But because our students are having access to all the social media, I'm seeing kids as young as 8, 9, 10 have some really inappropriate access to video content that's posted on social media. So think about that and think about how that's going to impact the student from thriving in a school setting, or just in general, how that student is going to thrive in life, right? When they have access, when their exosystem gives them access to all this inappropriate content. And then, as you can imagine, if the mesosystem isn't strongly established, meaning that there's a lack of communication between parents, guardians, caretakers, teachers, educators, therapists, and so on, the system is just going to start crumbling, and that's really going to impact the student, right? And then at the very outer layer is what we call the macro system. Macro system is looking at culture, wealth, poverty, social economic status, just kind of those external factors. Now, you might be sitting here saying, oh, this is great. She's talking about the eco-cultural theory and how this impacts students' development. What makes it tricky as an individual who cares so much about their student or so much about the client you work with is, unfortunately, we can't control all of these systems. And that's the part that I think makes our job very challenging when we are in this position where we want to help our clients. We want our students to thrive. We want our students to not exhibit challenging behaviors. We want our students to do well in life. But the fact that we can't control all of the different layered system makes it a bit challenging. The first thing we need to do is look at our teaching learning environment for our students. We want to make sure it's safe, loving, nurturing for our students, regardless of their background, regardless of their home life. Additionally, as an adult, as a trusted adult, we need to think about our tone of voice and our nonverbal behaviors, which include eye contact, body language, and gestures. Because the thing is, students pick up. Another thing that's very, very important in terms of setting up a positive, nurturing, loving environment is ongoing communication with key stakeholders. I can't emphasize this enough. The number one reason why I see parents or caretakers struggle with schools is because of the lack of communication. And then as a behavioralist, the next thing that's really important is documentation and data collection. Documentation for two reasons. One, right, that's a form of data collection. And, as a behavior analyst, we should know that all of our decisions should be data-driven. Without data, we can't make statements because then those just become our own biased opinions. And then two, I live in California. I grew up in California, and California is a very sue-happy state. So you should have everything documented to show that you've tried to really help support this student so that, worst case scenario, if something does happen, you have proof, you cover yourself. Like I said, environment causes most behaviors. And I put this little collage together yesterday because here's the thing. You might say, it's not just environment, but it's mostly environment that causes behaviors. You can think about your own behaviors and how you behave in different environments. Do you behave the same way when you're working with a client versus when you're at home with your family versus when you're out, at a restaurant or a bar or a club with your friends? Do your behaviors change based on the environment you're in? If you said no, you're lying to yourself, because it definitely does. And let me go out and analyze your behavior, and I will show you with data that your behavior does in fact change based on the different environment you're in. I know for sure when I'm talking to my coworkers, my colleagues, I behave in a certain way. And then when I'm, with my friends, my behaviors are very different. So behavior. So moving on. So now we've gotten behavior or environment out of the way, and hopefully you've realized how important setting up that environment is. Now, let's say you have this ideal environment. And so hopefully if you have this amazing environment, you're going to see reduced behaviors, but that's not always the case, right? Behavior, whether it's good or bad, cute or ugly, there's always a reason for why our clients or students exhibit behavior. And behavior is maintained through the social and physical interaction with the environment, meaning that the environment is reinforcing that behavior, or the environment is saying, nah, don't do that behavior. No one likes that. And then that becomes punishing and we don't do that behavior anymore. But when we look at the literature, 99.9% of behavior has a communicative intent. Problem behaviors happen because it's effective and efficient. And I want you guys to repeat that. Problem behaviors happen because it's effective and efficient. It's so much easier for a child to engage in the challenging behavior and not have to do it than to try to say, I don't want to do it. As a whole class, some strategies that you can implement is providing clear rules and boundaries. We also want to be consistent with our expectations. If I tell Bella, hey, your bedtime is 9 o'clock, her bedtime is going to be 9 o'clock Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Maybe there might be some exceptions, but her bedtime is going to be 9 o'clock the majority of the time. If you tell a student you can't do something, you need to stand your ground and follow through with that. I attended an IEP meeting the other day, and the mom shared that the whole class is expected to wash their hands after they come in from recess. And her student is the only student that doesn't need to wash his hands. And the mom said, that is disgusting. If the entire student population is expected to wash their hands, my son should be expected to wash his hands. So how come he fell out of line where he now learns that he doesn't have to wash his hands? Because it got reinforced, right? At some point when he told his teacher, I'm not going to wash my hand, and that he runs away, the teacher's not going to chase him, says, okay, you don't have to wash your hands. So now he doesn't have to wash his hands. And now I'm like, oh, it's going to be a little bit more harder. We're going to have to climb this uphill battle now to get him to actually wash his hands now. Sometimes we choose to reinforce the disruptive behavior because it gives us that immediate relief. Like, for example, if my daughter's having a temper tantrum because she doesn't want to sleep at 9 o'clock, how easy is it for me to say, okay, you don't have to sleep, you can go play? How easy is that for me, right? Because then I'm not having to deal with the temper tantrum. But even though it gives me that temporary relief of having to deal with that behavior, in the long run, it's more damaging. And when I want to address that behavior in the long run, it becomes that much more challenging. So oftentimes what I see happening in terms of when students are learning challenging behaviors is we, as the individuals in that student's microsystem, we kind of put a Band-Aid on it. We say, you know what, we'll deal with this behavior later. Let me just reinforce it just this one time. And let me just put a Band-Aid on it and we'll deal with it later. But guess what? Putting that Band-Aid on that first time is the first mistake we made. Because instead of addressing that behavior and addressing that conflict right there and then, we've now made it worse. This is something so easy to do, but I don't know why we don't always do it, is providing choices to students. Say, hey, class, do you guys want to write 3 sentences or 4 sentences? Do you want to use a blue pen or a red pen? Do you want 2 minutes or 3 minutes? How easy is it to give our students choices? But we just don't do enough of that. Visual schedules and timers is another great thing. Again, this teacher has nailed it in terms of visuals. Reminders and priming is another good thing. Like, hey, we have 5 more minutes, 3 more minutes, 2 more minutes, right? We want to give our students these reminders throughout the day because they forget. And then we also want to think of creating some sort of class-wide system that promotes positive relationships. I love when teachers have in their classroom, like, positive affirmation statements where kids can write positive notes to each other. I think that's always so sweet and cute. And so I tell people, here's the thing, you guys, if you guys were to do 2 things very well, I guarantee you would not be dealing with students who exhibit challenging behaviors. The 2 things would be being consistent and providing praise. If you can just do those 2 things in your day-to-day practice, I guarantee you will eliminate the majority of problem behaviors. But the reality is we don't do that. You might be consistent, but the praising part is something that we forget to do as adults, as educators. Why? Because it's like we almost expect, because it's like societal norms. It's like society expects this from our students. And so we need to do that. And so if it's already an expected behavior, why should I praise you for exhibiting an expected behavior, right? But that's the wrong mindset to have. Another strategy that I'm a huge advocate for is what we call teacher check-in and teacher check-out. Again, sometimes our students just need that little extra attention, and it's something as simple as, hey, how was your day this morning, right? Have this small talk. Literally, you guys, you're spending 2 additional minutes with this student. And by giving the student 2 additional minutes, you're going to really change the student's day or student's outlook, and you're creating that strong relationship with that student. Behavior contracts, I'm a huge advocate for behavior contracts because students learn early in life that life is all about contracts. When you get a job, there's a contract. When you buy a house, there's a contract. When you buy a car, there's a contract. So, why not teach them early? For some of my younger kids, I like to do token economy, but as soon as they can, I like to then switch over to a self-management system. But I'm a huge advocate of self-management. If you had to ask me if I could only teach my students one skill, if I can only use one strategy, what would it be? My response would be self-management. And why would I pick self-management? Self-management it's been researched, it's been in the literature, it's well documented that it's a pivotal behavior. And when I'm saying it's a pivotal behavior, meaning that if we teach our students good self-management skills, it's going to open up all these other possibilities without us having to directly teach them. So the premise behind self-management is that this individual student becomes aware of his or her own behavior and learns how to stay on task and manage their behavior. And then I'm going to talk about a bit more advanced proactive strategies. So a few things. First one is what we call non-contingent reinforcement. And I'm going to try to translate this to non-layman's terms to the best of my ability. Essentially, the idea with non-contingent reinforcement, or what we call NCR, is we're going to over-satiate the students with access to the reinforcers or the rewards so that they no longer really care for it. When they no longer care for it, they're not going to act out. They're not going to have the challenging behaviors. So we deliver the reinforcement regardless of the behavior happening or not. They get it regardless. They get it automatically, right? And when we do that, it's like too much of a good thing becomes a bad thing, right? If you overindulge yourself in something, you eventually get tired of it and you don't want it anymore, right? Another proactive strategy that's a bit more advanced is this idea called differential reinforcement. This is when we reward the positive behaviors while ignoring the disruptive behavior. So there's different variations of DR procedures. The first one being DRA, and this was when they're behaving well, we give them a lot of attention, access to the rewards and stuff. But as soon as they're misbehaving, we don't give them any attention. And you guys probably do this, right? If you've been in this field, you probably do this without knowing it. The other variations of DR is what we call differential reinforcement of other behaviors, DRO. This is the student cannot exhibit the problem behavior for a period of time. And if they don't do this behavior, they get the reward. So it might be, let's say a student is shouting out in class. You say, if you can sit quietly for 10 minutes without shouting out, you can get a 10-minute break. That would be a DRO, right? They cannot do the behavior for a period of time, and then they get rewarded. Two other variations is DRL and DRH. My favorite personal, you guys, is DRH because we're actively teaching them to do the positive behavior. So DRH is the premise that if you can do this behavior X amount of times, you can get the reward. So for example, I might tell the student, if you can raise a quiet hand at least 3 times while we sit on the carpet, you can get a 10-minute break. DRL is the opposite, right? If you can do less of the problem behavior during a period of time, then you get that reward. But you see why I'm a bigger fan of the DRH than the DRL? It's because DRH, we're focusing on really teaching the student to exhibit that positive replacement behavior. So the very last thing I want to cover is how do we then address when students exhibit problem behaviors? We've tried these proactive strategies and they're still being disruptive. Well, first we want to redirect the student to use a replacement behavior, thinking about the DR strategies to say, hey, buddy, remember, just ask me for a break. Or, hey, just tell me you need help, right? Just encourage them to try to use that replacement behavior. If that doesn't work, you need to block access to all reinforcing items so that they don't get to learn that they can be disruptive and get fun things. Sometimes the best thing is to say, oh, looks like you're really frustrated. Let me give you some space and check in on you in a few. And then once they're calm, they need to practice the replacement behavior. This is a step that I don't see schools doing enough. We don't practice enough of the replacement behavior. So make our students practice, practice, practice. And then additionally, how we respond is important. We want to make sure we're calm, cool, and collected. We want to ensure that everyone is safe. Use a calm voice. I know that's easier said than done, but yelling at a student isn't going to help if the student is already agitated. That's like fighting fire with fire. Call for backup. We want to definitely de-escalate as quickly as possible without reinforcing the problem behavior. And sometimes it takes long. It might take a student the entire day, but that's fine because you better win that battle, because in the future, because the thing about behavior change is we're looking at future occurrences. In the future, it's going to be less and less.